And we are back on the 0 Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow. And as the nation comes to grips with the notion of Donald Trump now confirmed to be the Republican nominee, he's got it. Here to join us and discuss one of the stranger dimensions of the Trump phenomenon is Eric Boehlert. He's joined us before. He's a senior fellow at Media Matters for America. He's a former senior writer for Salon. That's easy for me to say. And his books include Lapdogs, How the Press Rolled Over for Bush, and Bloggers on the Bus, How the Internet Changed Politics and the Press. He joins us now. Eric, thanks for coming on the program.
Oh, my pleasure.
So what's the latest in, I had this fantasy, Eric. You and I have talked a bunch of times, so I'm just going to talk to you friend to friend. I had this notion that Donald Trump would have the common sense to, as much as I think he's a loon, that he would have the common sense once he nailed the nomination to stop talking like a crazy person and start talking like a major party candidate, because that would be the path of likeliest success for him. But reading you and others, I get the sense that that's not where the Donald is going. Tell us about the conspiracy stuff.
Yeah, it is baffling because, well, look, I'm telling him how to run his campaign, and he seems to be doing well in the Republican primary. But, the idea, you would think that, the cliche about the pivot, right? You win your party's nomination, and you set your sights on the general election. You got to try to find maybe some independents. Although in the last few years, there's an idea that the pivot is not about finding independents, because there are none. The idea of the pivot is you super motivate your base, and I guess that's where he's going, because it seems like he's just he's doubling down on his, far right Republican primary strategy, and he's sort of added to the mix now. The Clintons were criminals. Hillary's an enabler. Bill Clinton should be in prison. They stole all your money. Maybe they killed Vince Foster. So his general election strategy, at least this week, and who knows what it'll be in 4 or 5 days, because he doesn't seem to have any sort of long-term plan, is just kind of throw out these 90 Clinton scandals and watch the press scurry, because there's really nothing that the press really likes more than talking about Bill Clinton's 90s sex life and talking about all the scandals and everything. So, on the one hand, it works because, the press, they're not going to cover substance. We've seen that Donald Trump really can't talk for more than 3 or 4 minutes about any policy issue on the planet. So it's not like he has a choice, right? He gave this moronic climate speech yesterday where, as someone said on Twitter, it really did look like he was reading it for the first time himself. He was giving the speech, and he was like reacting to it like, oh, wow, this is interesting. Like, not only obviously did he not write it, but I don't even think he read it. I don't even think he knew what he was talking about. He's not going to get on stage with Hillary Clinton and debate the finer points of carbon tax. But he can just kind of suggest that, she had Vince Foster murdered and dragged his body from apartment to apartment. And that's what his campaign looks like this week. But my last point is, he's just now hired a pollster. He's bragged that he doesn't have a focus groups. I think this is just all off the top of his head. I mean, he's kind of conferring with Roger Stone, his henchman, and they're just kind of throwing the stuff out there. I don't think there's any long-term plan to it. I mean, it's certainly not. If you go back to Swift Boat Veterans for Truth and that smear campaign, I mean, that thing was planned within an inch of its life among the best and brightest of the smear merchants of the Republican Party. This Trump stuff just seems like they make it up day to day.
I think I think you make a couple great points there, Eric Boehlert. I mean, I think, first of all, Roger Stone, if his business cards don't say henchman, they should. And it should say, the caption should always say Roger Stone, Trump henchman. I mean, I love that. He's like mini me. But number one. But more importantly, I've got to say, of all this stuff, I think you're absolutely right that he's making it up as he goes along. Here's part of what I'll give you first what amazes me, and then B, what frightens me. Okay, what amazes me is that he's actually talking about Vince Foster in 2016. I mean, it amazes me, it angers me, because when someone commits suicide, it's a family
Yes.
tragedy, and to exploit that or just run your mouth off it because you don't off about it because you don't know better is enormously insensitive to the survivors and to the memory of the person lost. It's such a nutty conspiracy theory that that a president or his wife would murder somebody and be pretty bad at it and running from room to room or whatever. I mean, it's just so offensive and stupid. So that's what amazes me. What frightens me, and it's in your article about the conspiracy theories. What frightens me is the palling around with Alex Jones, who is for people who don't. I mean, you can tell us who he is, but this to me is part of the whole incipient fascism narrative that I think is true about this guy, which is you terrify people with crazy, lunatic conspiracy theories, and then you can control them, basically. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about that dimension of what Trump's doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, there has been some decent, reporting about, especially after the Foster stuff, that, a good portion of Trump's campaign is based on conspiracy, and not like kind of the we didn't really land on the moon conspiracy, but just kind of awful personal attacks. Ted Cruz's father might have been involved, with the Kennedy assassination and things like that. But there's even if the general policy, build a wall because all the murderers and rapists are coming across. I mean, that in itself is a conspiracy because obviously there's no data to back it up. So I think what he's doing, look, I mean, he's clearly appealing to anger, frustration, paranoia, and he's using some of the mass media to do that. I mean, you mentioned Alex Jones, who this is a guy who when there's a school shooting, he says that it's a false flag, it was a government operation. I mean, this is stuff that nobody within 100 miles of the RNC or anyone inside Washington D.C. with a $400 suit would ever even dream of legitimizing or talking to or things like that. But Trump is kind of running his campaign through that. Trump is running his campaign through the far, far right kind of talk radio. I mean, we're talking to the right of Rush Limbaugh, and this is one of the reasons Fox News spent the last 9 months up until the Megyn Kelly interview when they decided we surrender, you win, we're going to genuflect, and do you mind if I underhand the wiffle ball pitch to you? I mean, but for 9 months before that, people like Charles Crossheimer and Stephen Hayes, other people at Fox looked at Trump and they said, well, this is insane. He has nothing to do with the conservative movement. He has nothing to do with the Republican Party. I mean, that's why Fox didn't just go in all the way, because Fox doesn't really want to troll on I guess the radical right conspiracy. I mean, they'll dip their toes in stuff. But the larger reason that Fox was so freaked out, and the larger reason that the RNC and the Republican Party is so freaked out, and it goes back to the original point about the 90 allegations, is no one has any idea what this guy's going to do, right? I don't think people at the RNC can even get their phone calls returned from the Trump campaign. He's making it up as he goes. He's doing these 90s attacks this week, but then at the end of the week, all that poof, it all disappeared. I don't know if he saw some polling or if he just got bored of it or what. But again, there's no sustained logic or strategy to it. And I know the press is all excited. There were 3 polls that showed him tied with Hillary, and oh my gosh, this is going to be a barn burner. But we'll see. There's a couple interesting stories just today about the sort of the get out the vote and what you need to win elections in America. I mean, he's just now putting together his fundraising team. I mean, think about that. It's the summer before the election, and the Republican frontrunner is just now trying to assemble a fundraising team. We've never really seen anything like that.
No, we haven't. And Eric Boehlert of Media Matters, one of my concerns is that because we've never seen anything like it, we don't have a model for how
Yep.
it's likely to play out or how to
Yep.
counteract it. And we're all including the Republican establishment. We're all in unknown territory here. Do you, you follow this stuff for a living? Do you think he believes this crazy stuff, or do you think he's just riffing, or do you think, do you have any theory? Because he's really, as you said, he's going with people to the right of Rush Limbaugh. And I was kind of living in a fool's paradise a little bit, thinking I knew there was hate and an undercurrent of hate and radical right wingism in this country. But, I saw Rush's numbers going down, and I kind of thought, well, that demographic is aging out. But he's going to the right of Rush. He's going to the extremist nuts, the way he did with the birtherism stuff. Do you think that he believes this, or do you think he thinks this is a way to sell himself into the presidency?
My hunch is he thinks it's a way to sell himself. A combination. I mean, we saw his top aide Paul Manafort this week talking about Trump's famous ban on Muslims in America, and he's saying, well, that's the starting point. You shouldn't really take it seriously. Manafort a couple of weeks ago saying, well, you're going to see a new Donald Trump, where he's going to have a new image. And even Trump, right? When the last week he was talking about some of his extreme proposals, he said, "Well, this is all a suggestion. Look, I'm just throwing stuff out there. When I win, when I become president, I'll let you know what I'm going to do. But for you to hold me to something I said a couple weeks ago doesn't make sense because it's just a suggestion. I'm just having a talk with me." So there's very little indication that he strongly believes in anything other than his own narcissism, and I think that's basically what drives. So, look, he spent decades saying wonderful things about Bill and Hillary Clinton, invited them to their wedding, gave them money, was outspoken in the 90s that this witch hunt over Paula Jones and Bill Clinton's sex life was ridiculous, and the Republicans were embarrassing themselves. So, yeah, there's no indication that he really believes in anything other than his own self-image.
Yeah, that's my instinct too, Eric Boehlert, although it doesn't comfort me about the whole fascism thing, because if you look at
Right.
any tin pot dictator, they're usually driven by narcissism first and foremost. That's why they design the stupid uniforms, or in his case, the big signs that say Trump. So gold, this and that.
Right.
So I still worry a lot about the guy. And I particularly worry about the flirtations, it seems to me, with white nationalists, not just on the
Yeah.
birther stuff, because he was a big birther, but also just, when white nationalists come out and say great things about him, or turns out that one of his delegates at the convention is a white nationalist, he never seems to do more than the absolute minimum necessary to distance himself from them. And I don't know, does that scare you as much as it scares me?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing scares me, and the fact that he can, waltz through and win the Republican primary. It didn't surprise me. I mean, I wrote last fall that, of course, he can win the nomination. Hey, look who he's running against, and look what the Republican Party became under Barack Obama. It became this radical, dead-end, really bizarre organization, and the press pretended, it was kind of, oh, well, it's center-right. Why can't Obama just work with Mitch McConnell? He'll do whatever. So I mean, the press was asleep for 8 years about what the Republican Party had become. But look, it is upsetting, and what's also upsetting and potentially dangerous is the normalization, right?
Right.
And so if you just did a tally every week of the stupid, outrageous, disgusting things Trump did and the lies he told, and just every week after week after week. And if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders had done two, the press would insist they drop out of the race. But you turn on Charlie Rose, and you turn on these other people who should know better, and they have these roundtable discussions. Well, he's so savvy when it comes to the media. Tell me about how how does he come up with this? They're just completely ignoring the sort of rancid bigotry and the racism and the white nationalism, and they're giving the guy a pass. There's no question about it. And so yes, that is disturbing. And so when Trump can be seen as basically this sort of tough talking, authentic, outside the beltway guy. Look, if there was a Republican businessman who wanted to run for president as sort of a tough talking, authentic, outside the beltway guy, God bless him. And I have no problem with people who voted for Mitt Romney and John McCain. I didn't, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is not the same thing, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's
John McCain kind of to the right. He's not Ross Perot, a renegade businessman. He is new and different and dangerous, and we shouldn't pretend he's not.
I think that's the perfect summary. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But Eric Boehlert, Senior Fellow at Media Matters, thanks for coming on and talking about this frightening phenomenon called Donald Trump.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.